Tuesday, August 9th, 2022, Maneco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. Today we're going to look at how buying stuff is how you beat inflation. And that is a comment from an Argentine that was interviewed for an article by the New York Times. Yes, the New York Times. They've actually done a very good article about how Argentines cope with inflation and have been coping for over 50 years. Aside from that, I'm going to touch upon hyperinflation and some of the videos that I've done. I'm going to also create a playlist for all my videos about hyperinflation because I think it's getting serious. And why is that? Well, I heard overnight there was a raid on President Trump's residence in Florida, Mar-a-Lago, by the FBI. What's that got to do with hyperinflation? Well, I think it's one of the symptoms of hyperinflation, the political mayhem in the country where hyperinflation happens. We saw that in 1920s Germany after World War I, and I think it's happening in the United States and everywhere around the West, for that matter. And I'm going to recommend you watch a video I did back in February this year. It's entitled "The West is Going Down the Unavoidable Road to Hyperinflation." And I enumerate all the symptoms. I did 14 symptoms of hyperinflation. And I think what's happening politically in the US is really bad in terms of giving signals for hyperinflation. And even President Trump in his comment that he made about the raid said that the United States had become a third world country. I thought about doing this video about Mar-a-Lago separately from the Argentinian article, but it all fits in because Argentina is a very interesting case. Before I start, I'd like to thank you guys again for your help and support. And if you haven't subscribed to the channel and you like watching my videos, make sure you subscribe to the channel. It helps. It helps show YouTube that there's a lot of interest in my channel, and maybe they will somewhat change the algorithms. I want to start, before we look at the article from the New York Times, at a term that was coined in the early 20th century, and it is "as rich as an Argentine." What's that? What's that all about? Well, I'll go through. There's a little article about it. I had heard of it before many times, but I wanted to put it through to you and show you what it's all about as well. This is from wallstreetoasis.com, and they talk about "as rich as an Argentine." And it says, in the early part of the 20th century, Argentina was among the top 10 richest countries in the world, maintaining this position into the 1950s. Between 1890 and 1930s, Buenos Aires was totally overhauled, changed from a pretty Spanish colonial town to what it is today. A huge city with sprawling boulevards, French and Italian architecture, hundreds of parks and plazas, and tree-lined streets. During this time, the very rich traveled to Europe, especially to Paris, where they painted the town red with their parties, their music, and their beautiful women. It was the French, seeing how lavishly the Argentines spent money, who coined the phrase "riche comme un Argentin," or "rich as an Argentine." So there you go. Argentina has not always been a basket case economically and inflation-wise, as you can see. And there's another article here. Argentina, once the richest country in the world. So this is from Ismail Ali Manik, .medium.com. The article says, Vito Tanzi's, the former head of IMF's Fiscal Affairs Department, book Argentina, an economic chronicle, how one of the richest countries in the world lost its wealth, is a must-read for every student of economic policy. So this is a guy from the IMF who wrote this book. And there's an excerpt from the book here. It says Argentina has had the same experience of a family who was rich and became poor. It is not easy to adjust to the new position. This may explain why Argentina has one of the highest ratios of psychologists per person in the world. Here's the interesting part, and then we'll go on to the New York Times article. By 1910, Argentina was one of the foremost countries in the world. It was one of the most important grain and meat exporters. Its GDP represented 50% of all Hispanic America, ranked 10th in the world's economy, and its trade accounted for 7% of the world's total. In 1913, its per capita income was higher than that of France, twice that of Italy, and almost 5 times that of Japan. So there you go. To the New York Times article, and I have to thank Mike from Rethinking the Dollar, which is a YouTube channel I think you should look at and consider subscribing to. He's very good. Mike from Rethinking the Dollar. Thank you, Mike. And I'm going to put a link to this article in the description. Yes, you need to pay for the New York Times, but I'm going to put an archive.ph link, which means you can read it for free. And I would say this is probably one of the best economic articles about inflation in the New York Times or in any publication, really, mainstream publication. And they didn't need, of course, Paul Krugman to write about it. And the reason why I think it's the best is because it was probably written by correspondents who are not PhDs in economics, and they talk to all kinds of people at all levels of society, and I thought it was really good. And maybe the New York Times is also trying to say that the inflation in the U.S. is not that bad, because look at the Argentines. They've got 90% inflation. They've been struggling with inflation for generations. They've had hyperinflation in the 90s. And they're still holding a lot of dollars. This article talks a lot how Argentines actually hold a lot of physical $100 bills. And I highly recommend you read this. I'm not going to go through the whole thing, but one of the most interesting quotes that I found was the title of this video that I used. And it is, "Buying Stuff is How You Beat Inflation." And why is that? Well, it corresponds exactly with what I've been telling you for the last 2 years about the markets, that you have to be in hard assets, commodities, and also precious metals, gold and silver. Because when you graduate into a hyperinflation, which is more to do with the loss of confidence in the currency, and it starts, of course, with the kind of inflation that we have right now, 9-10%. And yes, eventually people realize that governments and central banks are never going to stop it, so they lose confidence. But yeah, this is the most interesting part here for me, and this is what it says here. Ignacio Howand, a 34-year-old publicist, buys everything he can in installments, including his bed, his clothes, a PlayStation 5, and a potato peeler. It's not that he can't afford them, it's that he's betting the value of the peso will fall. If he's right, his final payments cost significantly less. That bet, he said, has always paid off. The last installment I paid for the TV or fridge cost 2 or 3 McDonald's combos, he said. Buying stuff is how you beat inflation. So does this mean I think people should go out there and take on debt and buy things on installments? Maybe not right now because we haven't really gotten to a stage where we are at 90% inflation. But I think it could come to that. And even now, I've noticed like, yes, you're seeing a lot of credit card spending. Consumer credit is going through the roof in the States. It's probably because deep down people know that the dollar is going to be worth less and less. I found myself and my wife as well. We're tending to go out, not that much, but when we do go out, we have a nice time because that in 6 months time or a year's time, you might have to pay a lot more for that nice steak lunch or that nice holiday. So I think it's already starting. And you'll see here, and Paul Krugman will probably never talk about this, but it mentions here that the underlying problem, of course, is government deficit spending, that the government keeps printing money out of thin air to cover its deficits, and it's been happening for decades. And with the Inflation Propellant Act having just come out, and by that I mean the Inflation Reduction Act, it just goes to show that in the U.S. the same thing is happening. And as President Trump said yesterday, the United States is becoming more and more like a third world country, unfortunately. And here in the UK as well, we have this Conservative Party leadership contest, which is supposed to decide the next prime minister. And one of the guys running, Sunak, there's only two people left now, Sunak and Liz Truss. He's just promising more. So look here in the FT, Sunak promises support for households in cost of living crisis. So we're going down, unfortunately, the road of Argentina. And the reason why I wanted to show you how wealthy Argentina was is that it can happen to any nation, even the wealthiest of nations. And I think as that gentleman, the 34-year-old Argentine said, buying stuff is how you beat inflation. And maybe also, yeah, anything but the currency. And if you are lucky enough to be in a position to exchange those currencies that are becoming worth less and less into real money, i.e. gold and silver, I think you will be able to protect yourself well for the other side, hopefully, of the hyperinflation. In Argentina, of course, they're very dependent on the US dollar, but what will happen to the millions of Argentines that have billions of dollars, not just under the mattress, but in foreign bank accounts when the dollar goes? I'm sure they might start looking at gold and silver once the dollar starts going the way of the peso. And the way that's going to be shown and reflected is in the price of gold and silver. That is really the line in the sand for the dollar. For the peso, of course, it's the dollar. So there you go. Let's quickly look at the markets now. It's 8:15 a.m. London time. We've got spot gold at 17.85. That's down just over $3. Range has been 17.91 to 17.83. Silver is down 5 cents at 20.60. High's been 75. The low 57. The Dow futures up 64. The Nasdaq futures is up 34, and S&P is up 9. FTSE futures is down 13. Eurostoxx futures down 4. To the currencies now, sterling is down slightly at 120.74. The euro is unchanged, 102.00. The dollar is unchanged versus the yen at 134.93. Dollar is down slightly versus the Swiss franc at 95.40. And the dollar is unchanged versus the yuan at 6.76. The dollar's up slightly versus the ruble at 61.20. To the rest of the currencies, Aussie dollar is down slightly at 69.74. The dollar is up slightly versus the Canadian dollar, 128.59, and the Kiwi dollar is down 0.2 at 62.76. To the general commodities, WTI crude is down 0.75%, 89.50. The Brent is down 0.75 as well at 95.33. High grade copper is up slightly at 360. And US nat gas, let's have a look. Nat gas is up 1.6% at 7.69. Let's look at the Dutch nat gas futures contract. Yeah, that's come off a little bit. It's trading around 190, so we were around 200 for the last week or so. So that's come off slightly. And to finish off, let's quickly look at the 10-year yield and the Treasury curve. So we saw the 10-year drop yesterday quite significantly, about 10 basis points. Right now, we're down 1 basis point, at 275. And the 2-year is down 2.5 at 319. So it's still inverted about 44 basis points. If you enjoyed this video, make sure you hit the like button. Please share this video far and wide. And as I said earlier, think about subscribing to my channel if you haven't yet. And with that, I'm going to wish you all a great day. Take care. Bye.